Hello, everyone. This is the Happy House Hunters, and we are going through a series of the 6 F's of real estate. So we're talking about finding real estate and then fixing it. Finding it and then funding it and then fixing it. And then we can either flip it, fill it, and finally our freedom number in real estate. So we have with us this evening, we have Harvey and Josh. And so I am going to turn it over to Harvey and Josh. And Josh turned his camera off, but he's here. There he is. Hello, guys.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Harvey Yergin. This is Josh Hively. We are business partners together. We run a small real estate investment company in Columbus, Ohio, where we buy distressed properties of really any size and get into all kinds of shenanigans with those properties. We flip some stuff, we wholesale some stuff, and we hold some stuff. We are trending towards more holding. Our goal is to get up to where Kathy is. And as your journey has probably gone and will continue, the more you talk to seasoned real estate investors, the more you hear stories like, I wish I never would have sold anything. But you still have to have cash flow. You still have to have money in the bank. So we are in the process right now, just trying to find that right mix of things to hold and things to sell, with our long-term goals being probably what yours are, which are to grow long-term wealth, to increase our freedom and our ability to do really whatever the hell we want to do all day long. Although Josh and I have had this conversation multiple times, I'm not sure we would do much else, because we get to do things like talk to you guys and hang out with people like Kathy and help sellers out of sticky situations and buy real estate. So that's what we do. That's what we're about. Tonight, we're talking about wholesaling specifically. And Josh and my mission really is to help you buy more deals, to do more deals, whether you've done 0 or you've done 1 or 2, help you get that first deal or help you get the next deal. Kathy, you and I were talking earlier today, but I think the primary audience that we're speaking to are people that are just what I said, who have not done a deal yet, are just trying to break into real estate. Is that
generally right? Yeah, and we have some attendees on, and please feel free to put in the chat box how many deals have you done, or are you buying and holding? Are you wanting to just flip? Put in the chat where you're at in the industry, so we have an idea of what you're looking for, and that way we can help you better.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Now I have several already. I had 30 doors. I did sell 2 duplexes, and then I bought another single family. So I'm doing a little bit of buying and selling, but again, just for cash flow and trying to move on some of the properties that do not have quite the cash flow I want, and acquiring more properties that have more of the cash flow that I want. And so I am doing a little buying and selling, more buying than selling.
Yeah, that's advanced level stuff. Well, I don't see a lot of activity in the chat box. That's okay.
Yep, I don't either. We've got Christy, Jennifer, and Candace on board with us. And so tell us again where you're at in the industry. If you don't have any deals, just put a big fat 0 in there. Yeah, Candace says no deals, just getting started. Okay, that's kind of what we thought.
And if you do feel bold enough to put a question in there at some point, please do. This is only as valuable as it is relevant to your particular circumstance.
Christy's just getting started.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting, I mean, for those who are watching the recording, you know, at a later date and time, even if you've done a bunch of deals, I think a lot of this information is still relevant. Maybe you've done a bunch of flips, but you haven't gotten into rentals yet, or you own some rental properties, but you're thinking about getting into wholesaling. I think kind of wherever you're at, some of this, there's probably some bit of information here that's relevant to any situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely, Josh. I agree with that because I know I'm going to learn a lot tonight. Wholesaling is probably my weakest link. And
Mhm.
because I want to buy more, because I want to have more buy and holds with more cash flow, wholesaling is definitely a fast way to generate that cash flow.
To piggyback on what Josh said, our additional promise to anybody within earshot of us right now is if you reach out to us and we'll get you our contact information, Josh or I, to schedule a time to sit down with us, we will go over in detail how to, all these things that are running in the back of your mind that you don't know how to do that are probably keeping you from doing your first deal, like how to estimate rehab, how to find ARV, how to find a buyer, how to find deals, those little nuance, where to look for financing, which is Josh's cup of tea or his niche, among other things. But we will sit down with you and we will look at specific deals if you have them, and we will go into detail on all of those things. So reach out to us, email, phone, and that's our promise to you.
Yeah.
We're getting some more attendees coming in, so welcome to the Happy House Hunters. And my weak link, I think, is the closing. I can't quite wrap my mind around how the closings actually work on a wholesale. So that's where I need some help. But anyway,
Yeah.
I'll let you get to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's funny. Well, go ahead, Harvey, if you had something else.
Well, I was just going to kind of lay out our general plan for I guess the next hour or so. I'll give a general outline or intro into what wholesaling is, and then address what I think are some of the fears for people or misnomers or biggest questions for wholesaling. We'll try to, and we're going to zone in on what we think is the most important part of wholesaling if you wanted to get started immediately and assume that your goal is to do maybe one wholesale deal in the next 3 months, honing in on, and Josh is actually going to cover this, honing in on that one topic that we think if you focused on it, you could do at least one deal in the next 3 months. And then hopefully there's some questions and we'll see where we're at. Josh, did you have something else?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yep, one deal in the next 3 months. We're assuming, the premise here is we're assuming you're not trying to start a full-fledged 20 deal a month wholesaling operation. We assume that you are trying to break into the real estate game and are going to start off slow and then build from there. First things first, what is wholesaling? Well, really in Ohio, when we say wholesaling, we mean assigning. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an attorney. None of this is legal advice, but I'm fairly certain that in Ohio, almost any contract is assignable. And what that means is I can go into contract to purchase goods or services from a seller. And then I can assign that contract to somebody else, for instance, Josh. And then he becomes the person who is responsible to fulfill the buyer's end of that contract because that contract has been assigned to him. So when we're talking about wholesaling, that's what we're talking about. The reason it's very popular is because in theory, it's a no money way to make money in real estate, in theory. So the process is I go and I negotiate a contract for a piece of property, piece of real estate, let's say with Kathy. We agree on a price, we agree on some terms, we put it into a contract, we write it down, we both sign it. We have a contract for me to buy her real estate. And then I have a buyer named Josh who is also looking for real estate. And he's willing to pay, let's say, $5,000 more than the contract price that's written in the contract between me and Kathy for that same piece of property. So then I me and Josh, we go into an assignment contract that says he'll assume all of the responsibilities of that contract and buy that property for essentially $5,000 more than I was going to buy it for. This Kathy gets the same amount of money that was in the contract. I keep the $5,000 spread. I really had no money or skin in the game besides my time and my effort and a little bit of risk that I took on while I was in contract with Kathy. And Josh is happy, Kathy is happy, and I am happy because I have $5,000 in my pocket that I didn't have in my pocket before. And I go on to the next deal. What I miss? That's the gist of it.
That's the gist of it. No, that sounds good. And I'm taking notes because I get questions about this all the time. So again, my weak link is how that closing happens. But you'll get to that, I'm sure.
Yeah. Anything to add on that, Josh?
No, I think that's good.
Pretty simple. So wholesaling and assigning, essentially the same thing in Ohio. If you know anything about wholesaling, or if you've heard the term before, you've likely heard the term from paying attention to real estate podcasts, real estate YouTube videos, real estate gurus, books, articles, etc. And the process probably seems intimidating to you because you're not real sure how the mechanics work through the deal. For instance, like the closing. The process from a high level looks like this. I'm going to use the Kathy, me, and Josh example again. Me and Kathy go into contract because we've negotiated a mutually agreeable deal on her piece of real estate. Then Josh and I go into contract to assign that same contract to Josh for $5,000. Then we go to closing. The title company, let me say this. There are title companies who are familiar with the assignment process, and there are title companies who are not. How do you find a title company who's familiar with the process? You go to a Facebook group in your local area that has to do with real estate investing, and you ask the question, can you recommend a title company who is familiar with assignment contracts? And you'll get 50 responses within 10 minutes. Call one or three of them up and pick one. And they'll handle the way the settlement statement or HUD will need to look to make sure everybody's getting paid and all the funds are distributed the way they need to go. And really, if you're the assignee, if you're the assignor, which is me in this case, and Josh is the assignee, but I don't need to worry about anything. I'm playing quarterback on the whole thing. I'm making sure that Kathy's in the loop, Josh is in the loop, and the title company knows what's going on so that everybody shows up on closing day and we're happy. Before that, there are other buckets of activities that I think people find intimidating. Josh was mentioning today, Josh, where do you think people spend, they're starting out in wholesaling, where do you think they spend the majority of their time or worry about the most?
Yeah, I think the one thing that we see that's the most common for new wholesalers is building a buyer's list. So
Okay.
it's very common for people to start out in wholesaling and start working on building their buyer's list. Now, a buyer's list for an active wholesaler is an important thing, but I mean, you guys can probably figure out if you don't have any real estate or contracts to assign, then a buyer's list probably isn't that helpful.
Yeah. Building a buyer's list is one that people get hung up on. Estimating rehab, negotiating with the seller, figuring out ARV, making sure they have the right paperwork. All important things, no doubt. But at least in our experience, if you can concentrate on finding deals and then you get that real good one that just, it's going to go through, and that you're going to be able to assign it because you've negotiated a price that makes a lot of sense to assign, you're going to figure out the rest of the steps. And one reason for that is because you're smart and you're capable and you work hard. But this other reason for that is because, especially in Columbus, and I know there's people that watch this all over the place, and I would imagine the same is true, but I can speak for Columbus that there are so many people here who are already doing or have done what you are doing, and they want to help. There is no lack of people who will guide you through some of these other steps in the process. I have no doubt that you will figure those out. But the message from Josh and I tonight is to focus on getting the deals first, and then the rest will fall in place. But how do you find deals? We've heard about things like cold calling and door knocking, direct mail, text messaging, ringless voicemail, all of these different systems. And if you're like me, those, even today, after I've been a full-time real estate investor for almost 4 years, that sounds intimidating to me. It sounds like a lot of work, sounds like a lot of systems, sounds like a lot of risk, sounds like a lot of money, frankly. Josh is going to tell you a better way to do it, an easier way to do it, and what we think is a more approachable and more efficient way to go about finding deals.
Yeah, so I mean, I think a couple things. You know, a lot of two kind of main caveats before we get into the deal. Yeah, a lot of wholesaling, or a lot of this is just a numbers game. It's very uncommon for folks to, you know, the first time they go out and ask somebody to buy their real estate, that they stumble across an awesome wholesale deal. So a lot of this is just a numbers game. The more people you talk to, the more opportunities you're going to get. And then I guess, I mean, the other thing is, like, so we can talk about, like, what is a deal? So the most important thing, if you're looking to wholesale real estate for a profit, the most important thing in any deal is that there's enough margin in the deal for not only you to make profit, but then for your end buyer to feel comfortable purchasing the property as well. So, you know, if somebody has $100,000 piece of property and they're willing to sell it to you for $100,000, well, I probably can't sell it to a Harvey for $105,000 because it's only worth 100. So that's probably the most important thing. So what you're looking for in a deal is going to be something with margin. How much margin sometimes is debatable, but, you know, roughly, you know, we're looking for 30 to 40% discount. So again, you know, especially in today's market. So if you go to somebody who has a very nice house that's worth $100,000 and you offer them $70,000, they're probably not going to take it because the house is nice, it's fixed up, and they can sell it for $100,000. It may not make sense for them to sell it to you. So oftentimes what we find is where we're able to find the most margin is in properties that either the property itself or the seller have some sort of distress. So a lot of the houses that we buy are very physically distressed. So just poor maintenance, you know, failing foundations, holes in roofs, all kinds of things like that. Or some of the other scenarios that we run across occasionally is, you know, old retiring landlords who had troubled tenants who have been destroying the property, or folks who have rented their houses to family members, they're now destroyed. Or on the seller distress side as well, situations like probate, pre-foreclosure, you know, a lot of these different things where maybe a traditional retail sale doesn't make sense. So so those are kind of the things that like we're looking for. And kind of going back a little bit, I think, using the premise of like Harvey was talking about, where if we're just thinking about trying to do, maybe one deal in this last quarter of the year, we want to go out and try to find, folks, either people or houses that kind of meet those criteria. Now, like Harvey mentioned earlier, there's a lot of ways to find those people. And especially if you're looking at scaling a business, you can throw a lot of money at this problem. And there's a ton of different ways to do it. But I think if you're just looking at getting started and, we're looking at doing one deal this next quarter, there's a few ways that we think are really good to kind of find that first deal. And some of these are strategies that we're still using. One of my favorites is what we call, driving for dollars or door knocking. So if you're just getting started out, you probably already know in your neighborhood, there's probably an ugly house. So everybody has the guy down the street or the lady who lives over there, who has this house that needs a lot of work. So one of my favorite things to do is just to find that house and go knock on the door. It sounds kind of intimidating to a lot of people, but going back to what Harvey said earlier, a lot of the folks that we work with, they need our help. They're in some sort of situation, their house is falling down, or they can't pay their mortgage, or whatever it is, they need our help. So, if you just go over to that house and you knock on the door and you have a conversation with the folks who live there, figure out what's going on and how you can help them. That's a great way. We just bought a house last week or 2 weeks ago from somebody. I was driving down the street, I saw a distressed house, I knocked on the door. Actually, that one's a little bit more elaborate. I actually knocked on the neighbor's door to find out about it. The neighbor then sold me one of his distressed rental properties with a troubled tenant in it. So that's one great way to do it. The other thing that we're doing in our business right now, we're spending a lot of time on, is just networking with people in our sphere of influence. So, one easy thing that you can do that's totally free is just tell everybody what you're doing, what it is that you're looking for. You can say you're looking for distressed real estate. You're looking for houses that need fixed up. Somebody that knows somebody else who has a troubled tenant, or a deteriorating property, vacant property, whatever it is. Somebody knows somebody else. One of the best deals that I've done in my real estate career to date is from that same method. I bought a duplex that's over on the west side of Columbus in a neighborhood called Westgate. I actually bought that property from my boss. The lady I was working for at the time, her parents owned it. I just happened to mention that I was getting into real estate. She said, my parents have this duplex that they want to sell. They were having trouble with tenants, et cetera, et cetera. There was a ton of deferred maintenance. I got a great deal on that house. So, just kind of those are two main things that I think just getting started out are really great places to start. And then kind of talking a little bit more about the sphere of influence, I think another good one is realtors. If almost everyone probably knows at least a handful of realtors, tell your friends who are realtors what it is that you're looking for. Oftentimes the houses that we're buying, they don't necessarily make sense for the retail sales model. So, we've bought houses before that were occupied at the time of closing with people with severe mental health issues. In a scenario like that, it probably doesn't make sense for a realtor is going to not want to list that property on the open market because of all of the issues around it. So, if you tell your friends, there are realtors or attorneys or whatever it is, what it is that you're doing, eventually somebody will bring up some of those opportunities to you.
Be clear, we're not buying houses from people with severe mental disabilities. There just happened to be somebody living in the property with severe mental
Correct.
disability.
He was not the seller.
Yes.
But that's a great story. We helped that guy out, and that turned out very well. So, yeah, what did I miss there, Harvey?
Well, I don't think you missed anything. I think the underlying theme under this, the few different strategies that you described, is a mindset that you, as somebody who has the capability to buy property in a distressed situation, have a service and a solution to provide people, and that there are people out there who can use that and who need that service. At least when I started, and I know Josh too, and I know Christy has felt this way, because Christy is on our team. She works with us. And I know, because we talk every single day, that all three of us have felt and had to deal with this notion that when we talk to people about their real estate or how we want to buy real estate, you feel like you're badgering people, that you're asking for something, that you're the telemarketer who's calling during dinner and asking if you want to buy newspapers or magazines, or that's really common. I think what's helped us get over that is really exploring not only the services that we have provided and continue to provide people, but thinking about the people that we're talking to and what services they may need and how we can be of a solution to them. And if you can frame it that way in your mind, then your message to people, the people that Josh was talking about in your sphere of influence, it's just going to come across better. You're going to be more confident, and you're not going to feel so much as a imposter. You're going to feel like, I have something that I do, that I understand, that I can provide to you, and you either want this service or you don't. If you don't, that's okay. And the second part of that is being okay with somebody not needing your service. There are people who are our customers, and there are people who are not our customers. And more people than otherwise are not our customers, and that's okay, because the deal only works if they are our customer, because that's the deal where they're happy, we're happy, everybody got something out of the transaction and out of the relationship. And those instances just work better than others.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, I think next to new wholesalers spending a lot of time building their buyers list, that's probably the second thing that we see that's the most common, is that new wholesalers are trying to make deals work with people who are not our customers. So we have wholesalers are calling me every single day. I talk to a wholesaler, usually way more than one. But a lot of times they're new wholesalers, and they're calling me and they say, hey, I have a deal. It's this house, it's on this street. I can assign it to you for $100,000. And I say, okay, great. I'm going to hang up and I'm going to take a look at the numbers. Well, then when I look up the numbers, the house is worth $100,000, or $195,000, and they're trying to give it to me for $100,000. Well, they're just spending a lot of time on a deal where there's no margins, and so it's kind of a waste of time. So yeah, that's a good point as well.
Yeah. What questions are out there? You put them in the chat, or
Well, I do have a question that once, let's say I get both sides, I get the seller, I get the buyer, they're both in contract, they both agree. do you always let the buyer know that they're, I mean, they know they're buying an assignment, but I have run into some wholesalers that they try to keep the whole thing a secret. They don't want the buyer and the seller to meet because they don't want them to know that they're the in-between guy that's getting paid $5,000 or $10,000 to, you know, to do this deal. So how do you, I always feel that being truthful is the best way to go, but how do you maneuver that so that you don't have a seller that's upset, like, well, why are you making $10,000 if I could have sold it to that person myself for 10,000 more?
Yeah. Let me take that for a second. I was going to mention this earlier and I forgot. So going way back, but I think it's relevant here. I think there's two different kinds of people that you see that are doing wholesale transactions. So there are people who are wholesaling real estate as their primary means of income and as their sole business strategy. And then the other type of people is what you have with like Harvey and I, for instance. For Harvey and I, wholesaling is not the main focus of our business, and is more actually a sort of a byproduct of excess lead generation. So when a lead comes into Harvey and I's business, we analyze the deal and we see if it makes sense, if it's a viable rental property. If it does not make sense as a rental property, then we're pushing it down through these other list of options of ways that we can help the seller, we can do a contract, and then we can also monetize the property for ourselves. Oftentimes that next step is wholesaling, but again, not our primary business model. So I think what happens a lot of times is when you have people who and so for instance, so sorry, going back a little bit more. So a lot of times the issues with wholesaling come up when folks don't have the ability to close on a property. So they put a property in contract, they don't actually have the money to buy it. And so now they're scrambling to try to figure out how to put it together on the back end. That's where you see most of the issues arise. So for Harvey and I, for instance, when we have a property and we put it in contract, we're fully capable of buying it, and we will buy it. You know, if we decide to wholesale, we can't find a buyer, we'll just buy it. It's not the end of the world. So I think some of the issues that you were just talking about, Kathy, come from one group of folks more than the other. Now, obviously, that's not everybody. There are plenty of big wholesale shops here in town who are doing a lot of deals, and that's their primary strategy. But yeah, honesty is the best policy. We try to be very transparent about, you know, the transactions that we're doing. And I think the other issue that you run into a lot of times is in those situations is you're just dealing with the wrong customer. A lot of the folks that we work with, they are aware of the assignment process. They realize what's going on. They understand the whole thing, and they're happy with the end of the transaction because we were able to get them the result that they were looking for, you know, closing on the timeline that they wanted, giving them a price that they were comfortable with, you know, meeting all of their other needs. I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but
It does, because again, I get that question a lot when folks are like, well, what happens if, you know, my buyer now, once they find out that it's an assignment, then what I hear you saying is that then they're just really not your customer.
Yeah.
If they're wanting out of the deal, or they're thinking the deal ought to be different, then they're probably just not your customer.
Yep. Yeah. In our contract, and this is something that I would advise you to explore with the people that you trust, but in our contract, it says right in our additional terms and conditions that essentially we may assign this contract.
Okay.
And there's some other verbiage in there that basically says that if we do assign it, whoever we assign it to is still beholden to the same terms of this contract that you and I agreed to, but it is a possibility.
Okay. Now, is there a way to find a sample of a wholesale contract somewhere so that, or do we need to just contact our real estate attorney and say, we need a really good contract that has an assignment clause in it?
As a real estate agent, I would advise you to talk to a real estate agent for the actual purchase contract
Okay,
and a real estate attorney for an assignment contract.
okay,
Because you need to make an assignment, you need those two pieces of paperwork at a minimum. Are there other ways to get an assignment contract? Yep. Just ask around, you'll find them. There's lots of different versions out there. And do you absolutely have to use the Columbus Board of Realtors or your local Board of Realtors purchase contract? I have seen a lot of purchase contracts that were not that contract, and you can find those too. So my official advice is to ask your real estate agent or ask your real estate attorney. But I would also say that in your circles of other real estate investors, there are other contracts out there.
okay. My guess is if you would choose a standardized one, it would be much easier at the title company to go through, because they're looking at all the different aspects of the contract as they're doing title searches and and basically doing the nuts and bolts of your deal.
Yeah, these title companies though that handle volume on assignments, they've seen it all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if it's a title company that is friendly to wholesaling, they're going to be okay as long as you've got all the parts and pieces in there. They're going to be okay doing their end of the job.
Yeah, and if you have questions about it, I would reach out to a title company directly and say, here's what I'm looking to do. I'd like to use you as my title company when it's time to close a deal, and their ears will perk up. And just ask them, when that happens, what do you want to see? What do you need from me? And then maybe say, do you have any examples?
Okay.
They might throw you one.
Because I've closed several deals without a realtor, and I've done my own contracts, and the title company in 2 or 3 instances did send me a blank purchase agreement that they would like to see.
Okay, there you go.
So I get that. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, title companies are your friend.
Yes.
They can be very helpful.
Yeah, and I'm pretty confident every title company has an attorney on staff. So usually
Yes.
they have documents in the office that they are likely willing to share with you, if nothing else, maybe for a small fee. But
Yeah, well, they're after the closing. So at the end of the day, I think they're again, like you said, they're very helpful with any information that you need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've had really good experiences, and I have some favorite title companies. Now, who gets to pick, the buyer or the seller, for some of our viewers today?
You know, I think in Ohio, it leans towards the seller normally, but if you're buying from a homeowner, that's your customer, the type of customers we've been talking about, they're not going to care. We pretty much anytime we make an offer, whether it's on a listed property or not, we're putting in our contract, this is the title company we're going to use, and very infrequently do we get pushback.
Okay. Because again, you guys do this for a living, and your seller, this might be the only time they've ever even sold a house.
Very true.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, very true. And one of the things that's important for us is not just that a title company is going to know what an assignment is and process it and make sure we get our money. The title company is absolutely pivotal to the comfort level of the seller, their level of communication. They're doing what they say they're going to do when they said they're going to do it. We've seen the worst of it and we've seen the best, and a good title company who is communicative and caters to the unique needs of a seller. There's no replacement for it.
So let me ask you this, when you're actually doing this, I'll call it a double close, so to speak, because do you
Well,
actually have to have funds
yeah,
to
so
buy the property before you do the second closing to sell the property?
yeah,
No.
well, so I was gonna mention that anyways, but so the way that Harvey was just describing the entire transaction is um the end buyer. So in the scenario where Kathy's the seller, Harvey's the wholesaler, and I'm the buyer, I'm actually going to be the one showing up on the day of closing with the money to buy the property. Harvey's never going to reach into his own pocket.
Okay,
So
Yeah. One transaction.
one transaction.
Okay.
Now there is a scenario which is called a double closing, which we have done a handful of times, where in that scenario, Harvey would actually, on the day of closing, buy the property from you. And then immediately afterwards, I would then show up and buy the property from Harvey. So that is also a scenario that is possible. We've done that a few different times for a handful of different reasons.
give me an example on when you would do that, and because if the norm is to just have one transaction, what would prompt you or force your hand, so to speak, to have to do a double closing?
I think it's normally if one end of the transaction is a little bit skittish, and let's say the seller is a little bit skittish, and for whatever reason, they just seem like the type of seller that if something seems funny to them or off, or if you start talking about assignment, that they might not show up to the closing table, or otherwise get turned off to the transaction. I think if you think, and we've done this before, if you think the best way to keep the deal together is to close it yourself and keep the integrity of that buyer-seller relationship on the front end, then that's what we do.
Okay, so you're prepared to buy the property is what you're saying,
Yes.
even if you have a buyer in your back pocket. So I get that, because again, when you're talking with someone that has a distressed property that is maybe in a situation where they have a lot of uncertainty in their life, they don't want one more uncertainty. And when you're talking about assignment and wholesaling, and you've got this, once removed buyer, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm out, I don't understand that, and I don't want to go there, then I can see where you would just say, I'm just going to enter into a contract, but you're still going to have that assignment clause in there.
Yeah.
But you're just simply going to buy the property and do the double closing and then turn around and sell the property. And so do you physically, in a double closing, have to have the transfer of funds, or does the title company understand what's happening and wait for the second closing and then disperse everything? That's the part where I'm a little fuzzy.
Yeah, so neither of us are attorneys, but in the state of Ohio, it is illegal to do a double closing using the end buyer's funds to cover the first end purchase. So
Okay.
it does need to be two separate transactions. So
Okay, so
Harvey buys
you
the
do
property
have to
from
have the
you,
money. Okay.
closed, and then I buy the property from Harvey. There's a very clear delineation between the two transactions.
Okay.
I want to add something about Ohio that is advantageous to somebody who is wholesaling or signing a property. I think it's an Ohio thing, Josh, but they prepare two different HUDs. They prepare a settlement statement. They prepare a buyer's settlement statement and a seller's settlement statement. And the buyer will see the assignment because they're paying it. So it goes on their settlement statement. But correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, most of the time the seller does not see the other side of the transaction, has no idea what you're making on the property as an assignment fee.
in a double close situation, it's two separate transactions, so there's a lot more delineation between the two transactions. So if you're looking for the minimal amount of information being displayed on the settlement statements, double closing is the way to go. The whole point of the HUD as a document is for transparency. And so in a normal assignment, basically all the information is available.
Yeah, I wish that Christy could talk because she probably would know this, but I'm pretty, I don't know.
I can bring her on if you want.
I don't want to put her on the spot either, but
Christy, tell us in the chat if you're willing to be put on the spot or not.
yeah, that's at least some research. I mean, it wouldn't take much, but they do prepare two different settlement statements for buyer and seller. And I'm fairly confident that they don't put the assignment fee on the seller's side.
Christy says she may not know the answer.
Yeah.
Well, I think it also depends on the title company because they can be prepared different ways. So I think there's a lot of factors that affect that, exactly how those documents are prepared and exactly how they're presented. So I would say if you have concerns, check in with your title company or your attorney.
That's the best advice. Because if you ask them, if they will, and in most cases, in a lot of the HUDs I've seen lately, they do. Just go ahead and prepare two sides, especially because it's not. We don't necessarily have roundtable closings anymore.
Yeah.
Which is fun. True. And there's also a lot of times that you don't even show up for a closing, that you just do it electronically. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless you're Christy. Christy goes to the closing.
Yeah, and I can tell you, we've churned through a lot of HUDs, over the last couple of years, and still, at least for my particular personality, the amount of information and the way that's displayed on a HUD is hard for me to process. So I know I'm not the only one who has trouble reading through those documents.
Sure.
Christy, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
What would you say about a quick recap? We talked about all the different possibilities to get stressed out and lost in the weeds in the wholesale/assignment process, but we focused in on finding deals first.
Now, tell us some ways that you find deals, because I can see that being a big question. Okay, I've made up my mind. I'm gonna try to do a deal within the next 3 months. How do I start finding these deals in addition to just driving for dollars and knocking on some doors? Is there some way to get some prospects on a list?
Hit it, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, like I said, I think starting out, those are some of the best ways. I think, what you just said, Kathy, was great, was a piece that I didn't mention. As you go through this, if you're looking at houses in your neighborhood or your friend says, I might know a guy, make a list of these potential properties, because you're probably not going to get a chance to buy a house on the first shot. So you're going to want to continue to follow up. So as you're going through, make a list. We can really go into the weeds on other ways to find properties. There are companies where you can buy a list of public data from. So there's a website called ListSource, for instance. You can go into ListSource. You can look at all the houses in Franklin County. You can filter by certain information. That's a way you can kind of get a list of properties to go after. Maybe you start handwriting some letters. That's something that we still do occasionally. We might go drive for dollars. We find a house we like. We door knock, nobody answers. Then we go back home. We handwrite them a letter. We send that letter to them or to wherever their tax bill mailing is going to. So, we can go really deep in the weeds, and maybe that's for the next call. But or reach out to me if you have more specific questions. But there's a lot of ways moving down the pipe, but I think just working that sphere of influence, and then just to kind of driving around and looking for those visibly distressed properties, I think are two great ways to start. And if you do that for a while and you don't feel like you're getting a good lead, then it may be worth exploring some other options. But again, it's really a volume number. If you drive around and find enough distressed properties, you'll get an opportunity to buy one.
Okay.
There was two things that Josh mentioned earlier too that I want to highlight. One is tell as many people as possible that you're getting into real estate or that you're in real estate. That's your parents, your brothers and sisters, your family. You go to a party and people ask you what you do. Tell people that. Like Josh mentioned earlier, just saying to his boss that he's getting into real estate resulted in him buying a distressed duplex in Westgate at a significant discount. There's a lot of power in telling people what it is you're looking for and what it is that you're doing beyond just your sphere of influence. As Josh has mentioned, here's a couple other examples that you may know in your life. And if you don't know them already, you can seek them out. Think about other people who run into people who have distressed property. For instance, everyone on this call probably has an insurance agent. It struck me, not my own idea, but it struck me recently to call my insurance agent and ask, do you ever run into people who can't get insurance because their house is too bad, too much deferred maintenance, too poor of condition? He said, yes, I run into those people at least a couple times a year. And the way it's actually kind of sad. The way it is that they get denied by 3 different insurance companies that their mortgage puts forced places insurance on their property, and it's astronomically higher than it would be otherwise.
Probably through Lloyd's of London, and they're just covering fire and wind. They're just covering natural. They're not covering it. They don't get a homeowner package at that point.
Whatever it is, it's not ideal.
Yeah.
And until I had this conversation with my insurance agent, he didn't have an option for people that he'd encounter that were in these scenarios. And all I had to say was, listen, if you want to help people out and you want to put or keep that property in your book of business, reach out to me. I'll go look at it. I'll be able to make an offer. It'll either work for them or it won't. But at least now you have someone, when a potential client of yours calls, instead of saying, sorry, I have nothing, I don't know anybody, now you can say, call this person or let me connect you directly with this person. So that's insurance agents. We all have them. Reach out to yours and just see if that happens for them. Some other ones that are on our idea board that we haven't explored yet. Think about restoration companies, basement contractors, exterior contractors, people that they're in houses all the time. They're in neighborhoods all the time, right? They bid jobs for people who turn them down, who clearly can't afford the extent of the work that's needed on their house. Mr., let's say, basement waterproofer person, how much would you like to be able to refer that person who cannot afford that necessary work on their house to us, who may be able to help them out of a sticky situation? And then that bid that you weren't going to get, now you get it, because we're going to have to do that work and we'll give it to you. If you sat down and thought through a short list of people that you could contact tomorrow who have frequent contact with homeowners, you'd probably come up with a nice little list. My next challenge to you would be to think through, okay, what scenarios might they run into where they could stand to benefit from our services or my service, and a potential customer of theirs could do the same.
So now let's say that you find that seller and you've done the numbers. And so now you have a formula, 65% of the ARV. And for those of you that may not know what that is, that's after repair value. And so now do you have a formula on how you calculate the repair, the rehab cost of that property to see if those numbers are going to work for a buyer?
Estimating rehab. Yes. And if you reach out, to Josh and I, we have a template, a tool, an
Okay.
estimator via Excel where it'll tell you if you look up cabinets by linear feet, how much to estimate by linear feet. If you check the list, and it'll tell you the average cost of a basement waterproofing or the average cost of a roof for a certain square footage. You really don't know if you haven't done it before. That's when you need somebody trusted to reach out to and say, here, I saw this, here's 50, 60 pictures I took when I was out there. Would you mind helping me estimate this rehab?
All right, so you guys heard that. Put your email address in the chat. I'll make sure that Harvey and Josh get it, or we're also going to ask Harvey and Josh to put their emails in there, and you can contact them direct, whatever works best for you.
Yeah, I'll put me and Josh's in here.
Perfect. And if anyone wants to put their email address in the chat, I will make sure that I forward that on, because if you're like me, sometimes when life goes on, you have good intentions and you think I'm going to contact these guys, and then life gets in the way. So if you toss your email in there, I'll make sure that Josh and Harvey get that. So perfect. All right. I think we've covered a lot of territory there. So wholesaling in Ohio is the same as an assignment contract. It's a no money way to make money in real estate, unless of course you have to do that double closing, and then you have to be prepared to buy at the table long enough for you to sell to your buyer. So you're going to agree with the price with the seller, then you're going to take that assignment contract and you're going to agree then with the price with your buyer. And what type of margin do you guys normally shoot for? Does it depend on the numbers, or do you kind of have a minimum that you shoot for to make the deal worthwhile for you? Do you want to make 5,000, 10,000? What do you want to make on an assignment contract?
It's really market dependent and it's deal dependent.
Okay.
I wouldn't say we have a number. We know, for instance, that landlords or flippers, they'll buy at sometimes as high as 90% of ARV minus rehab. So if we're seeing that happen and we just have a contract at 70%, then we have 20% wiggle room in there. We'll try to price it for buyers at something that draws a crowd and will move it quickly, but it's deal dependent and market dependent.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, and being deal dependent, I mean, sometimes, if we have a house that we really like, that we might actually want to keep, then the assignment price might be a little bit higher. So it just depends.
I get that. So in other words, you're going to try to keep 5,000 or maybe as much as 10,000 on a deal, but it's going to be deal dependent. It depends on what the numbers are for the deal. But then you need to find a title company that is familiar with assignment contracts. And then your number one thing to do is find the deals before you start building a buyer's list. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Because if you're sitting on a 65% of ARV minus rehab deal, buyers will come out of the woodwork.
All right, perfect. I'll let you guys go ahead then and tie up all the loose ends. We've got your contact information. Folks are putting their contact information in the chat. I will make sure that I forward that over to you guys.
I want to reiterate that if you reach out to us, we are more than willing to sit down with you and look at any deals that you have and help you analyze them and answer any questions that you have, try to fill in any need that you have in your wholesaling business or real estate investment business in general. If you enjoyed what you heard today and you want to check out some more of our content, we have a Facebook page, Instagram page, and a YouTube channel, Simple Solutions Real Estate. Lots of really good content on there, especially YouTube. We have a lot of educational content. We have classes with Christy where it's really short videos. We break down really specific topics about real estate. We have a series called Beers in Business, where we sit down with local Columbus entrepreneurs, feature a local beer and dive into their business and their story. Pretty cool series, all kinds of content on there. Check it out and reach out to us if you want to sit down and go over a deal.
You're muted, Kathy.
Sorry. I'm gonna put in the chat box where I'm gonna put all of this information. I'm recording, of course, this meetup, and I will put the links for you guys in there. And so if you just go to Kathy Benner International Academy, just Google that. You'll find the Happy House Hunters there, and that's where all of these free videos are. And I will put, along with this video on today's date, I will also put the links so that you can just tap into their information on YouTube or wherever. And I'll do some homework on my end, and I'll get all those links so that way you can connect with these guys. They're very helpful. They've got a lot of the answers, and so if you're serious about getting into the real estate investment business, these are the guys you need to connect with.
Yeah. I don't know if Josh has anything else, but I'd also just thank you, Kathy, for always giving us a chance and calling us back after multiple times being on here. You're crushing it. You're a mentor to us and to, the people on this call and plenty of people around the area. So thank you very much for not only the work that you do and putting groups like this together, giving yourself and your knowledge to people, but also helping us along and facilitating this community.
Well, I get excited because I started the International Academy, and of course it's a place where I can house all of these videos, but I'm all about passive income because I truly believe that a couple $100s a month might make a difference in what car you drive, and couple $1,000s a month is going to make a difference in what zip code you live in, what school your kids go to. So it makes a huge difference. And the way to do that is with passive income. So that's my passion. And that's why I do this. So we're all in this to help you, the listener out there, get started creating some passive income for yourself. And again, the definition of passive income is you do all the work up front and then it pays for itself over and over and over again. So if you can purchase a buy and hold property, my perfect formula is either, flip 2 and then buy 1, or wholesale 5 or 6 and then buy 1, get some cash flow coming into your account and then buy and hold so that you can have that passive income. Because once you get it ready to rent, you could just rent it for years. The buy and hold properties are the reason that I even was able to retire. I thought I was never going to be able to retire from corporate America. And once I got into real estate investing, I actually retired early. So you can do it. It's possible.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, we have some experience in this particular niche of real estate, but Harvey and I are still learning ourselves. We're starting to look at bigger deals, some multifamily stuff, et cetera, et cetera. And, we have a lot of people who pour into us and give us information and help on things. And so we just try to give that back. So we appreciate the opportunity, Kathy.
Yes. Thank you guys for always being there for me as well. I've learned a lot today. I took notes. I took all kind of notes. So I'm ready. Okay. I'm going to give it a try. I'll let you know how it goes.
Okay.
We'll be here for you.
All right. Thank you guys, and we'll see you soon.
See you, everybody.
Bye-bye.